the first of two virtual events on County Council's draft Community Energy Action Plan and the stakeholder engagement that we are conducting on that. I have some slides, so I will share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. So in terms of structure for this event, I'll be spending 5 minutes just talking about what is community energy. Then the bulk of the presentation will be about the content of the draft action plan that the County Council has produced. There'll be a few minutes covering what is included in the questionnaire we're asking stakeholders to respond to, and then an opportunity at the end for Q&A if there are any questions that people would like to ask. So, firstly, what is community energy? I think for this particular audience, you're probably very familiar with what it is, but useful as a reminder. We have here a York community energy definition, which is a pretty good one. So it's what happens when people come together and build their own solutions to the energy system problems, motivated by climate change, tackling pollution, or fuel poverty. And it involves communities installing their own renewable energy systems to supply clean power and bring benefits back to their neighbourhoods. So one of the key elements really is about community ownership and community control of energy assets. This provides a few key figures from Community Energy England's State of the Sector Overview, which was published last month. So the community energy sector in total has 398 megawatts of renewable electricity generating capacity and generated 617 gigawatt hours of electricity in 2023. Which is enough to supply 228,530 households. Good morning, Tim. Just to let you know, we are recording this session and we'll make the recording available to people. At the moment, I'm just going through a background of what community energy is. I'm then going to cover 30 minutes on the stakeholder engagement exercise that we're currently doing on the council's draft community energy plan, and then there'll be a Q&A session at the end if you've got questions you'd like to raise. Another important aspect of the community energy sector is very much volunteer driven. So although there were nearly 800 people employed in the community energy sector in 2023, there were 3,700 volunteers active in the sector, so very much something that's delivered by communities and volunteers within communities. The last extract from that State of the Sector overview looks at what's in the pipeline. So there has been a bit of a diversification of activity from community energy groups. Traditionally, it's been very much around delivering solar projects or wind turbine projects. But there is a lot of activity now in communities getting involved in delivering energy advice and energy efficiency services as well. And in terms of pipeline, there are around 80 projects contributing another 270 megawatts of capacity that have reached a certain stage of development with communities and need unlocking to move forward. In Cambridgeshire, we've got two well-known examples of community energy projects. So Gamlingay invested in a community-owned wind turbine, 330 kilowatt turbine, funded by residents and local businesses. And revenue from that, 10% of the net income, is used to provide grants for community projects. At Reach, they developed a solar farm. It was a 250 kilowatt solar farm. The map shows the area of the solar farm outlined in red, just to give you a sense of scale relative to the size of the village. So we're not generally talking about enormous projects with community energy. It tends to be 1 or 2 turbines or a small solar farm covering part of a field. Reach's project was funded by a share offer, and they had 112 investors, mostly local residents, and the surplus income goes to a community benevolent fund. Moving on now to the stakeholder engagement exercise that we're currently running on Consult CAM's website. County Council is seeking stakeholder views on a proposed action plan, and that sets out a number of actions that we propose to take to support communities to develop their own energy projects. And that's very much with the aim of enabling communities to have more control over energy supply and benefit from the move to a clean energy transition. And we'll talk a bit more later about how they can benefit. We've talked a little bit already about surplus income being used for local grants, but there's also a mechanism by which residents can benefit from reduced energy prices. The stakeholder engagement exercise is on the Consult CAM's website, and this is the URL for that if you've not already had a chance to look at it. So that's where you can go to read the draft action plan and to access the survey questionnaire, which will enable you to provide your feedback on the options that we proposed. The draft action plan itself is on there, and the stakeholder questionnaire. Closing date is the 16th of September, so please do get responses in by then. And the plan after that is to take the conclusions from that exercise to our Environment and Green Investment Committee in November and seek a decision from them on whether to adopt the action plan and which options to include in it for actions to support communities. We have got a fairly good response rate so far, very good actually. It's much higher than I was expecting in total. So 91 responses as of early last week, and obviously still a couple of weeks left to run. This slide looks at challenges and barriers to community energy, and again this data is taken from Community Energy England's State of the Sector report. This is a full State of the Sector report from 2022, and it included surveying of community energy groups to understand what barriers they'd experienced. So the most common barrier was time and capacity, and then the next most commonly stated barrier was early stage funding. So this is funding for feasibility studies and for development work to take projects through planning to get them to a stage where they're ready for people to invest in them. Then a catch-all other category at 14%, and then 11% of responses highlighting these barriers. We had expert support or lack of it, lower grid connection costs, and then at 10% guidance with new business models, reduced planning complexity at 9%, and 2 at 6% assistance to recruit volunteers and better loan rates. Some of those things the County Council is well placed to help address. So we think we can probably help with the time and capacity barrier, the early stage funding barrier, expert support, and potentially to some degree with guidance with new business models and reduced planning complexity. Some of the areas we can't help with at all are completely outside our sphere of influence. So lower grid connection costs, that's not within our control to influence, and probably others will need to assist as well as the council with guidance on new business models and planning complexity, as a lot of that will come from central government as well as local government. And indeed, planning authorities for community energy projects will tend to be the district councils rather than county council itself. Moving on to other initiatives that are relevant to supporting community energy and are being taken by other organisations than county council. There is a community energy fund which provides grant funding for early stage development. That is capped at £40,000 for feasibility studies and £100,000 for project development work to take projects through planning. So potentially that is a funding that you have to apply for. For larger projects, the planning costs could easily exceed £100,000. So that may be something that it would be appropriate for the council to look at providing some top-up funding to. There's also the Combined Authorities Net Zero Villages programme, which is a £1 million capital grant fund. Details of that are to be published at the moment, but we understand that that will be administered by the district councils. So essentially, the combined authority will provide capital funding to each district council, and they will then invite applications for use of that capital funding, which could be used for community energy projects. It could also be used for other decarbonisation initiatives. Then South Cambridgeshire had a zero carbon communities initiative, grants of £2,000 to £15,000. I believe that's currently closed at the moment. I'm not sure whether there will be a subsequent phase of it, but I believe the initial phase at least closed for applications in I think it was June or July. In Finland, there are a number of very local specific grants available. So these are capital grants that were provided by wind farm developers when their projects were approved. They're in Ransommoor, Glassmoor and Whitemill, and they are capital grants typically of up to around £10,000, and they are specifically for renewable energy and energy efficiency works. And then East Cambs has a facilities improvement grant, which can provide up to £10,000 for projects to improve village halls and community centres. So that could potentially be a source of funding towards rooftop solar PV installations, for example. And then last but by no means least, in the domestic retrofit, energy efficiency and renewable energy retrofit area, the district councils and county council has a shared initiative called Action on Energy, which has recruited or has procured 5 installers who've been thoroughly vetted by City Council as part of that procurement process, and those are available to residents both for grant funded work for residents who are eligible for home upgrade grant, which is a grant for residents on lower incomes in lower efficiency properties. But those contractors can also be used by self-funding residents who wish to make use of contractors that have been vetted by the councils. I wasn't last. I should have also mentioned Peterborough Environment City Trust have an advice and support service on home energy efficiency. It doesn't cover the whole of the county, but it does cover Fenland, Hunt, City and East Cambs. This slide looks at central government policy because we are in the very early days of a new government. There's still a lot of detail to emerge on this, but there have already been some positive steps that are relevant for community energy projects. So on the 8th of July, there was a government policy statement that removed some long-standing planning constraints for onshore wind projects, and those were removed with immediate effect. So essentially, onshore wind projects face the same planning requirements as any other form of energy development. The government's also announced that it will be producing a local power plan, and that's part of the new Great British Energy's responsibilities. And the aim of that is that the local power plan will ensure communities own and benefit from clean power projects. And the government will partner with and fund local authorities and community energy groups on small to medium projects. targeting a total of up to 8 gigawatts of capacity. I'm not sure, I presume that's over the course of the current Parliament, and support a decentralised and more resilient energy system. So reducing pressure on the transmission grid, for example, by more decentralised energy generation. It also aims to ensure or provide commercial, technical and project planning assistance and ensure coherence with other public sector functions. In particular, the UK Infrastructure Bank is mentioned as a potential source of investment for those projects. I put a question mark after this. In publications from the Labour Party last year, there was an indication that the local power plan might include up to £600 million of funding for local authorities and £400 million in low interest loans for communities. I haven't seen anything post-election or in the Labour manifesto on that, so whether that still stands, I'm not quite certain. Excuse me. So this next slide covers some potential community energy project ideas that are outlined very briefly in the draft action plan. The first of those is rooftop solar on a community building, so that might be a village hall or a community centre, but it could also be on a local school, but delivered by a local community energy group, or indeed on a local business, but delivered by community energy. The way that would work would be the community energy group would invest and deliver the project, and then the host building would sign a power purchase agreement to buy electricity from them. So that would have mutual benefits in providing low cost electricity to the host, but providing a better return for the community energy group than if they were just trying to sell the electricity to the grid at broadly wholesale prices. Moving up a step in scale, we could foresee projects similar to the Reach and Gamlingay projects, so community owned and operated solar farms or wind turbines. These could sell electricity either via power purchase agreements, or some of the smart export guarantee providers will offer smart export guarantees to projects of up to 5 megawatts. So that would be a relatively simple route to sell electricity from such a project. Adding a further element to that type of project, there is an organisation called Energy Local who've developed an innovative way of sleeving electricity to local residents. So in this case, as well as the community owning and operating a wind farm or solar farm, they would sell electricity to local residents when the turbine or the solar was generating at a much reduced cost than their normal retail electricity price. That does involve entering into the community energy group entering into a power purchase agreement with a specific, well, one or two specific licensed electricity suppliers that have signed up with Energy Local to offer that kind of service. So you'll find details of that on Energy Local's website. In the domestic retrofit space, another project idea would be communities working to promote uptake of domestic retrofit to local residents, whether that be energy efficiency improvements like insulation or installation of renewable energy systems like solar or heat pumps. That work would probably involve raising awareness amongst residents of the availability of grants like the boiler upgrade scheme grant, but also for lower income homes. It probably won't be the home upgrade grant because we're coming towards the end of that, but it will probably be the successor to that, which at the moment we think is probably going to be called the Local Authority Retrofit Scheme, or LARS for short. But I think we're probably fairly confident there will be grant funding available for domestic retrofit for lower income, lower energy efficiency homes. And that kind of community activity might also involve procuring a single installer that all members of the community could then make use of, just to give people more confidence in that process of finding a trusted installer. And the final project idea that's outlined in the draft action plan, we've titled Wind Powered Heat, and that title comes from a study by an organisation called Possible. And it's really a combination of many of the above things. It's a community-owned turbine sleeving electricity to residents so they can access lower cost electricity when the turbine's generating, and installation of domestic heat pumps, and potentially solar as well, and accessing the boiler upgrade scheme grants towards the cost of heat pump installations. It's quite an interesting concept. It's quite involved, and there are a lot of elements to the system. So you've got the wind turbine, the sleeving, and the domestic retrofit. But Possible study found that you could save up to 31% on heating costs using this type of approach, and up to a 90% carbon saving relative to gas heating. So moving on to the actions that the County Council has proposed in the draft action plan. These cover different stages of project development. So some of them cover the feasibility study stage, some of them cover the stage where you're developing the project through planning consent and securing investment, and some of them cover the operation stage. The first three of them actually cover all three of those stages. And the first idea is to establish a Cambridgeshire-wide community energy cooperative. So that would pool the expertise required to develop these types of projects, and address that time and expertise, those time and expertise barriers that were mentioned in Community Energy England's survey of challenges and barriers to community energy. So that would bring together skills like project management, finance, marketing, environmental knowledge, engineering knowledge, all within a central group that could then support individual communities in delivering their own projects. Second action is a council community energy development officer. So this will be someone to provide guidance and advice to individual community energy groups looking to develop their own projects, and act as something of a critical friend in reviewing their plans as they develop. And that officer would then probably be involved in the drafting of guidance documents. And one of the ideas that came out from early engagement with stakeholders was to have what they termed route maps, setting out the steps that a group would need to take to deliver a rooftop solar PV project, a community wind turbine project, charge point projects, a whole range of typical types of projects that communities have an interest in doing. Fourth idea was match funding for feasibility studies. So we talked about the Community Energy Fund grants being available, but having caps on them at £40,000 for feasibility study work and £100,000 for project development. So it may well be that some projects would exceed £100,000, and the council could potentially then offer some match funding for those. And I think we'd probably look to have a recycled match funding fund. So any projects that then were successful in securing investment to move forward into the build phase, they would repay that grant at that stage, and it could be reused for subsequent projects. And then the last couple of ideas on support for community energy, kind of purist sense, are brokering customer relationships. So this is looking at matching community energy groups with local schools or potentially local council-owned buildings that might be suitable hosts for rooftop solar, and suitable customers to buy electricity from them. It could also include local businesses potentially. And the final option was a search for sites activity where the Council Community Energy Development Officer would access a wide range of GIS data sets to look at suitable sites across the county in all ownerships, both private ownership and public ownership, suitable sites for hosting renewable community-owned renewable energy projects. So that would then involve looking at things like wind resource and solar irradiance, but also proximity to grid substations for connection into the grid for the larger projects. And if we can access it, data on grid constraints to understand whether grid connection is likely to be quick and affordable or more expensive. But also not just looking solely at the energy space, but checking that there aren't higher priority uses for those sites. So looking, for example, at the grade of agricultural land, so to make sure we're not identifying land that will be better used for agricultural use, or looking at heritage assets as well to make sure we're not compromising heritage value. And natural environment value as well. So whether there are any particular biodiversity, strong biodiversity values for a particular parcel of land. The second sort of area covered by the actions is very much around supporting domestic energy efficiency. So here the first idea is helping promote uptake of domestic retrofit grant funding. So things like the boiler upgrade scheme and the local authority retrofit scheme that will come along and replace the home upgrade grant for supporting lower income, lower energy efficiency homes. And I think here what we're envisaging is this would involve the council providing materials and training and information to communities to enable them to raise awareness of these grants with their own residents, and also potentially to target that activity, so to help identify streets where there might be more properties with lower energy efficiency ratings, for example, that might be eligible for local authority retrofit scheme grant funding, for example. The second action in this theme is very closely related, but it's about the delivery side of actually installing domestic renewables. So this might involve providing a route map for community-led projects for solar and heat pump retrofits. And again, that's probably going to cover things like how to market the opportunity to residents, how to go about procuring a contractor, how to go through the process of home surveys, and what to look out for on the installation side as well. Then the fourth area was raising awareness of innovative energy tariffs. So I think here we were envisaging the council might provide generic information about time of use tariffs, for example, and the energy local offering that I mentioned. If residents live close to a community-owned wind farm or solar farm, they could join an energy local club and access reduced cost electricity that way. This is obviously a very fast moving area with lots of different offers from lots of different providers, and obviously the council's not in the business of promoting specific providers, so for the detail we would be providing links to comparison and switching websites rather than attempting to reproduce the information that they already provide. And the last area in this particular theme, probably one of the more contentious proposals, I think. So some of the grant funding that's available under things like the local authority retrofit scheme is available to private landlords as well, but historically there's been very low uptake of it. And this is a bit of a concern, particularly because there's a strong overlap between fuel poverty and those in private rented accommodation. So there are benefits to capturing more energy efficiency upgrades in the private rented space. So potentially the council could support in this area by a targeted communications and engagement campaign to promote uptake of those grants amongst private landlords, with the aim very much of helping reduce residents' bills. The final theme, and this has only got a single action in it, is education and awareness raising. So this came from discussions with our communities team around some of the work they've been doing on an initiative called Closer to Communities. And the aim would be to conduct education and awareness raising activities to reach out to those who are not currently already engaged in clean energy as a subject. It would share experience, so hopefully we'll be able to share experience from communities that have successfully delivered projects with those that are perhaps at a much earlier stage in their journey. And the aim is that it would enable communities to get involved and access some of the benefits that are available, such as grant funding for local projects, generating income for their local community, saving bills for local residents, and just giving people a sense of empowerment and a feeling of more control about changes in the energy market and the transition to a clean energy system. In parallel with the development of the draft action plan and the stakeholder engagement we're conducting, we've been looking at a pilot program of rooftop solar PV projects on schools to be delivered by a community energy organisation. And we've worked with two community energy organisations to look at the opportunity for this, the Schools Energy Co-op and Solar for Schools. Broadly, they have quite a similar offering, and I think we're seeing similar kinds of conclusions from the work so far, that potentially they could be offering electricity at 18 to 19 pence per kilowatt hour to schools rather than the 32-ish pence per kilowatt hour that a lot of schools are paying at the moment. They then offer surplus revenue sharing with the school. The business cases for these types of projects seem to only work once you've got a certain amount of scale. So we found of the schools they've looked at that where there's scope to accommodate a 30 kilowatt project, that tends to be workable. Below that, it's more problematic. And we could also potentially add some additional council-owned buildings into this programme as well. So perhaps children's centres and county council-run community centres. We've had 16 expressions of interest from schools, and at the initial desktop assessment viability stage where we're at the moment, it looks like up to 9 of those are probably viable, subject to further survey and further detailed business cases. And there are a couple that could be made viable with a small capital contribution, and by small I mean less than 25%. So unfortunately there are 5 schools at least that we couldn't find a solution for in this under this approach, but it looks fairly positive for the majority of schools. So next steps we're waiting for are site surveys and also identification of some non-school buildings to add into the process, like the council community centres that I mentioned. The stakeholder questionnaire itself, that can be accessed at the same web address as the draft action plan. And when you go to that web page, you'll find, I think it's towards the bottom of the page, a section entitled Stakeholder Questionnaire and a big Take Survey button. And if you go onto that, you'll find it has around 22 questions. And I say around because the number of questions varies depending on the type of recipient. But those questions will cover who are you and who are you responding on behalf of. Do you support or oppose the proposal to adopt a community energy action plan? That is the council to adopt that. And for each of the proposed actions, to what extent do you support or oppose it? There's also a number of questions where you're provided a free text box to provide supporting explanations to explain why you've answered in a particular way. And also whether there are particular factors that you think the council needs to take into account when it is delivering whatever actions come out of the exercise. And finally, obvious question, is there anything that we've overlooked and should have included but haven't? And also any other comments? That's the end of the slide. So I'd allowed 20 minutes now for Q&A if people have questions. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards. If you send me your email addresses, I can provide those. My email address is on the Consult CAMS website if you don't already have it, so do have a look there for that, but it's christopher.parkin@cambridgeshire.gov.uk. And at the end of these slides, I won't go through them, but there's a set of links to other sources of information that might be of interest around in the three themes: community, energy, domestic energy efficiency, and awareness raising, I think. Okay, any questions on any of that, or indeed anything else that I've not mentioned?
Yeah, I had a question, Chris. I don't know whether you'll be able to cover it, and apologies for arriving slightly late. Is there an alternative to the Smart Export Guarantee? Because as you know, prices are very low, or rather, the revenue that you can get is very low compared with the retail cost of electricity. And I saw what you were saying about the power agreement thing, where you're selling it to somebody local. I mean, my example is our village hall. We have quite an extensive solar array, but we're doing it via the Smart Export Guarantee, and obviously taking a bit back on our electricity bill to the council. But is there any way of increasing the revenue that is out there that we're missing a trick on?
That's a very good question. Complicated answer, I think. The first thing I'd say is on the Smart Export Guarantee, it obviously varies massively from supplier to supplier, and it varies over time as well. So it's probably worth regularly reviewing who you are using for a Smart Export Guarantee. Scottish Power appear to be providing the best rate at the moment at 12 pence a kilowatt hour, and that is available for people who are just export customers. You don't necessarily have to sign up with Scottish Power to buy electricity from them as well. So that's who we've been using for schools where we've installed solar on schools. In principle, you could set up a power purchase agreement to sell electricity to either another building that you've got a physical connection with, physical private wire connection to, but that's usually a very expensive thing to install, or to sell electricity to the grid to a licensed electricity supplier. But again, it tends to only be worthwhile for much larger projects, really. So I think for rooftop solar, realistically, you're probably limited to a Smart Export Guarantee and shopping around to get the best one that's available. You might also, if you're finding that a large proportion of the generation is exported, you might want to look at battery energy storage as a potential option as well. Any other questions?
No, that makes sense. Thanks, Chris. Yep.
Yes, Siobhan.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, please, Chris. But first of all, say thank you very much. I thought that was a really comprehensive, and it's really exciting to see all the thinking that's gone into that and how much the county council is wanting to get engaged in this. So thanks very much. I don't know if you've heard of the Cambridge Retrofit Hub, which is a community interest company set up which I'm trying to help a little with fundraising, and we are looking to we're sort of engaging with local builders to increase understanding of retrofit, developing sort of air tightness technologies that they can use, and aiming to provide a retrofit service and help build the suppliers for retrofit. And I'm just wondering whether there is any way in which what's envisaged by the county council can work with us and support us. So that was the first question. Whether that it doesn't fit exactly under anything that you've mentioned, but it very much seems to be the same kind of space.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear about that initiative. I think we definitely want to liaise with the retrofit hub, particularly around kind of marketing materials and messaging around technologies. So I would think there is scope for county council to provide some support, and also probably to learn a lot from the retrofit hub's experience as well.
So probably, are you the best person to reach out to have a meeting? Is probably what we need to do at
Yeah.
some point. Yeah.
For the time being, once if we do go ahead with the recruiting a community energy development officer, it'll probably be that person who'll report into me. But for now, yes, I'd be the primary contact.
That's excellent. And then the other thing was just a question around the likely timescale for the community energy development person.
So we have got job descriptions drafted and going through the process. So I think we should be in a position to certainly have adverts out by the shortly after the closure of this engagement exercise, provided it is an option that people support. Obviously, it will then take 3 months to get someone into post as a minimum, but I would imagine that by the end of the year or early next year, we'd hope to have someone in post.
Great. Great. Thanks very much. I think there's lots of other questions I could ask, but I won't. None of them are essential, so I'll leave it there.
Feel free to ask them. We've got the time, and obviously this event we don't have that many attendees, so you'd probably be asking questions on behalf of people who are not attending but able to listen to the recording, perhaps.
Okay, well, one of them was, I'm aware of the huge amount, and I know it's mentioned on one of your slides that Community Energy England are doing in the space, and I just wondered to what extent you're working with them.
So we have had limited engagement with them so far, just to really talk about their findings from the state of the sector reports. I think probably what would happen is that if the option to support the establishment of a Cambridgeshire-wide community energy co-op went forward, then that's the organisation that would then be heavily involved with Community Energy England, because obviously the council itself is not a community energy organisation. We have a different status.
That's helpful, thanks. What else? Oh, I was just interested. I mean, 91 responses when we're actually nowhere near the closing date is really impressive. And I was just interested in where those have come from, if you can share that, the kind of people who are responding.
Yeah, it's mostly individuals. So certainly we're very pleased with the response rate. I think we were probably expecting something like 30 or 40 responses. So to have this many with still 2 weeks to run is great. There were, I think, probably 4 or 5 organisations that were either businesses or parish councils, and 1 or 2 elected representatives, either district or parish councillors. But mostly it's responses from individuals.
Thanks. And is it your sense that there will be lots of interest in this from communities in Cambridgeshire? Have you got any kind of idea of that, or are you concerned that there may not be enough interest? Or
I think it's something that will build over time. There are half a dozen communities that already have projects in development who we have engaged with. There are more communities that have got active environment or eco groups that could potentially develop projects. And we'd like to be in a position to provide them with the support to make that easier. Um, but I'm sure that it will increase over time. So once people see one community successfully delivering a project, then obviously that helps with others. As I say, we have had the fabulous examples of the Reach and Gamlingay projects, but they were delivered a few years ago under a different funding landscape. So it would be good to see something new delivered under the current policy environment.
Yeah, and just one final question. I wondered whether you're aware of the work of the Centre for Sustainable Energy, the Future Energy Landscapes project that the initiative that they've developed. And I mean, if there's massives of interest anyway, I would think that probably isn't necessary, but it's a very interesting approach to sort of getting communities thinking about energy from a place of no particular initiatives in mind, a sort of very broad view. And I just wondered whether there'd been any thought as to whether that might be something for Cambridgeshire.
I wasn't aware of that initiative actually, so that's really helpful to have flagged it. Thank you very much. Obviously, very aware of the Centre for Sustainable Energy, but not that particular initiative. It sounds like that would fit very, very well with the awareness raising and education action within the draft action plan. So I shall read that with interest and work out how we can make use of it in Cambridgeshire.
Great, thanks.
Peter. Oh, I think perhaps you're frozen, Peter.
Being said, one thing I
think we can't hear you, Peter. We caught a few words, but not much of it. I think you may have a fairly poor connection. Do you want to try without your camera on? Or typing the question in the chat? Are there any other questions whilst we're waiting to see if Peter can get his question across to us? I'll take that as a no. We'll just wait a couple of minutes then to see if Peter's question comes in, and if not, we'll close the event there. So thank you for sharing your email address, Tim. I will send you the slides. I've got Siobhan's email address already, so I will send Siobhan the slides as well, and Peter similarly. Peter is typing. So far, just saying that his connection's gone. Wait a minute and see if anything else comes through. Hello again, Peter. How's your connection now?
Sorry, I literally have a new router en route to me to replace it. There are some serious problems in my internet connection. Sorry, what I was about to say was UK Power Networks, and they are developing a relationship. Is it at county council level or at district council level in terms of they have some form of a liaison officer which will actually be able to discuss various kind of issues around connectivity and things like that?
Yeah, we're certainly engaged with UK Power Networks. That's primarily been around the local area energy planning initiative, where the council is developing a local area energy plan for Cambridgeshire, and making use of UK Power Networks mapping tools for that purpose. So we do have that relationship, and we would expect to be able to get advice from UKPN to support community projects. Okay, any final questions before we close the session? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating. I know it's only been a select few, but your questions have been very helpful, and hopefully others will be able to access the recording who weren't able to attend today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Thanks.